Hey spookers, Mr. Haunted here. Before we start the video, I want to thank Killer Orange Cat for joining me in this video. I strongly recommend going to check him out because you will not be disappointed. The link to his channel will be in the description. Also, there will be a Halloween special on Tuesday, which is Halloween, so you won't want to miss that. Now, let's begin. I grew up in a family with 4 boys and 1 girl. My sister was the oldest, and she was always left in charge of us when our parents weren't around. She tried her best to be a good babysitter. She had 4 boys who didn't like being told what to do, so it was hard for her to blame her at all if things ever got out of hand. My parents bought a house out in the country when my dad got a job in a new state. Unfortunately, it was a good 1 hour out of town, so in the summer when my parents were off working, my sister had to deal with the 4 of us every day. On this one summer day, when both of our parents were at work, the boys all got together and grabbed our fishing poles and went out to have a fun day. We lived in a rural area, and there was a creek about an hour's walk from our house that we loved to fish in. We headed out early and we were there long before noon. When you fish in a creek, you rarely catch anything big. On this day though, we really didn't catch anything. All of us had spent hours trying to fish, but absolutely nothing was biting. It didn't take long for this to get boring, and I decided I was going to wander around a little bit. It was only a little while later that I felt I needed to go to the bathroom. So I went behind a tree and did my thing. When I was about done, I felt a hand fall on my shoulder. I was about to turn around and swear at whichever brother it was that startled me. But when I turned around, I felt the words catch in my throat when I realized that it was not one of my brothers, but rather a big redneck-looking guy. He was huge, wore overalls, and had a really big, messy beard. In shock, I tried to move away, but he grabbed me by the shoulder and held me in place. I struggled, tried to find a way to get away from him. I tried to hit him, but he was too big, and he was able to keep me away from him. Then, the worst thing of all happened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a jackknife. He quickly put the blade of the knife up against my neck. I froze, too scared to even think about doing anything. I just wished my brothers would come looking for me, but I was too afraid to even scream to get their attention. The guy began asking me who the hell I thought I was and why I was peeing on his property. I wanted to tell him that I didn't know that it was his property. I was just out with my brothers fishing, and there were not any anti-trespassing signs, so we didn't know we weren't supposed to be there. The man pressed the knife tightly up against my neck. I really believed that I would be dying right then and there. I even felt a trickle of blood run down my neck when the guy pushed the knife deeper into me, piercing in the skin. The guy began dragging me, and right when I felt like I was just out of luck, I heard some footsteps running in the leaves. My 2 older brothers, both big football jocks, yelled at the guy to get his damn hands off me. I picked up the knife and went to go stab the guy, but my second oldest brother grabbed it from me and then he threatened the big guy with it. The man got up and ran off. We hurried back to collect our youngest brother, and after that we ran home. The entire way we thought the man was following us. However, we got home all right. My sister was pissed, but then when we told her what happened, she called our parents. When my dad came home, we found out that the land we were on belonged to the man we rented the house from. When we contacted him, he didn't know the big guy when we described him. We never found out who he could have been.
On the river. I like to go fishing in the lakes and rivers in my area. It is a really huge area with tons of hills and forests. The lake is a big fishing and swimming area, but if you take your boat off of the lake and out into the river, very often you can find yourself very much alone. Every now and then, I'll keep my boat out on the river, and even spend the night out on the river. Only bad thing about sleeping in a boat is that you can get yourself a really stiff neck by the morning. A year ago, I had a pretty harrowing experience out on the river. It was the beginning of fall. The leaves had mostly turned colors, but they really hadn't been falling out of the trees much. The hills were going to be very beautiful. There weren't many people out on the lake that day. It made sense. School was back in session, and parents didn't tend to take their kids out while that was happening. It was cool to me though, because I knew that I would have some really good alone time. It didn't take long before I found my way down to the river. If the lake was mostly empty, the river was completely empty. I began fishing, and had a lot more luck than I had expected to get. I completely lost track of time as I slowly floated down the river. As the sun began to go down, I found myself beginning to feel relatively creeped out. I wasn't sure why, as I had been in this position before, but I realized it may have had to do with how empty the lake had been. Even when people like being by themselves, when they like being lonely, the loneliness can still be frightening. I wish I could truly explain what it was like. The sun was setting behind one of the hills, making the sky a bright orangish pink color. Not only that, but it was appearing to be blazing behind that different colored trees on the hill, making the scene look like a painting. It was nice to see. No words could really do it justice. The sun went down as I floated down the river. After a while, the sun went all the way down under the horizon, and I was left in the dark. Well, I had some lights on my boat, of course, but only the ones I was legally required to have on. The sun was replaced by the moon, and it was both full and bright. It looked lovely as it reflected off of the river. I don't know how long it had been that I drifted down that river before I heard the noise. It wasn't a scream. It almost seemed like an angry, frustrated yell. I perked up and immediately looked off in the direction of the sound, and I'll never ever forget what I saw, or what I think I saw. Two men were standing in the woods, not so deep that I couldn't see them. They looked like they were fighting, but it was a very one-sided fight. The bigger man knocked the smaller man hard upside the head, and his body just crumpled to the ground. And then the bigger man grabbed his arm and dragged him off into the forest. Not once did either man seem to have noticed me, as far as I knew. I wasn't really sure how to react. I was shocked. But after a moment, I quickly pulled my cell phone out of my bag, and of course, I didn't have a signal. I cursed a few times, but I took my boat to the shore and put down a marker so I would be able to find the area again. I intended to direct the police to it. I tried to be quiet because I didn't want the man to come back. I then got in my boat and tried to get back to the lake. I kept as far from that side of the shore as I could. After a few minutes, something caught my eye, and I looked back at the shore, and I saw some movement there, but I wasn't sure what it was. When I got back to the lake, I went past the parking lot area to go to the dock. My truck was one of only 2 vehicles in the parking lot. There was one other truck, and it was parked right beside mine. and I could have sworn I saw someone sitting in the front seat. I quickly checked my phone again, and I had a bar. So I quickly called the police and remained out on the lake until they arrived. They arrested the guy, who confessed to getting into a fistfight with his brother before knocking him out. He had seen me in the boat and drove to the parking lot in order to make sure I kept my mouth shut. Fortunately, his brother was only injured and not dead. But the man was arrested, and I had to go to court for several months after that.